Young man in his 20s, working in finance, worked in Midtown. He told the room of dozens of men that it had been 1 year since he bet on sports. It had been 1 year since he bet on options on platforms like Robinhood. And I was like, oh my God, these rooms are filling up with people who are struggling with trading in financial markets. People's views on risk-taking have fundamentally changed.
It is my pleasure to welcome back to the podcast, for the first time in person, markets reporter for the Wall Street Journal and CNBC contributor Gunjan Banerji. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. I'm excited for this.
Me too. So I reached out to you because you did some very, very long-term reporting on men who'd gotten themselves into a bit of addictive behaviors in terms of options trading, cryptocurrency. Sometimes they were going to meetings to try and wean themselves off of this addiction. And so for some context for you, I did an episode about sports gambling a little while ago and how the legalization has had negative effects on men. So we were focused on this one behavior. And people distinguish between gambling and investing. But unfortunately, some forms of investing have grown to resemble gambling type behaviors.
That's right. The lines between investing, trading, and gambling have never been as thin as they are right now.
See that, for sure.
It's incredibly tough to tell the difference. And what I found, attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings for a lot of last year, interviewing dozens of doctors, treatment centers, individual investors, dozens and dozens of them, I found that more and more men say that they are struggling with compulsive gambling, not in sports, not at casinos, but in the financial markets, on apps like Robinhood. They say that once they start trading, they cannot stop.
Oh, so I'm just going to out myself in particular ways because you were asking about, like, do I trade options? Do I do this? Do I do that?
Ooh, I want to hear this.
Yeah, no. So I.
What's in your Robinhood account?
Yeah, indeed. I'm pretty boring. So First, let me say that I enjoy gambling and risk-taking forms of behavior.
Same.
But I know myself well enough not to get myself going too far and down these directions. So some rules I have, as an example, I never trade on margin. I never borrow money.
Okay.
I never do anything with options, in large part because I know that stuff can spiral.
It can be very addictive because the returns are so explosive.
Yes.
We're not talking staid returns like you get in the stock market, the bond market. You can get jackpots within minutes, like turn $100 into $2,000 within minutes, and
within
that
minutes.
keeps.
So explain that, because that's actually, I thought it would happen within days, but you're saying minutes.
So in order to understand why the market is so addictive right now, we need to step back and just talk briefly about the changes in market structure that have happened since the COVID-19 pandemic, where many individuals, more individual investors than ever before, are trading on apps like Robinhood. And Wall Street keeps introducing riskier and riskier ways to play the market. Options, those are trades that have been around for so long. But for a long time, people were trading options that expired weeks from now, months from now, maybe even a year.
That's what I think of.
Right, what you're thinking of. Now you have options expiring the very same day. So it's kind of like the prop bets from sports betting have come to the market, just like you can bet on how many points LeBron James might score in the first quarter of an NBA game. You can bet on where Tesla stock will be within hours from now, where the S&P 500 will be within hours from now. And individual traders told me they found those particularly addictive because the returns can be so big and they're so quick. That keeps people wanting to go back to trade more and more and more. And these are pretty newfangled trades. These were not things that people were trading 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah, so it's true. When I think about gambling behaviors, certainly that stuff is very familiar. Like you can turn on a game and be like, oh, I'm going to make a bet right now on what happens on how many yards or touchdowns like my team gets within the first half. That's immediate gratification. We don't think of trades that way. At least I certainly don't. When I think of trades, I think, okay, Ideally, you're what's called a long-term investor, though that even seems very old-fashioned to say out loud now.
What's that?
Where you buy something and then you hope it accrues value over time, and you come back. And one thing I will say for myself, and we're going to delve into this, into why I think these behaviors are so prevalent now, is that I've always had fairly modest expectations of the returns I'm going to get. So I was educated in the 90s, let's say. And the other thing that happened to me, Gunjan, which I'm a little bit older than you, I think, I became a professional during the first .com boom and bust.
Okay.
So the NASDAQ, I remember these numbers vividly, went from 5,000 to 2,000. Between
crazy
1999 and 2001, let's say.
Yeah, I wasn't a stock market reporter back then.
Yeah, so maybe you were just like, why are mom and dad really sad? Which is my joke for people. It's like when you're like, mom and dad would be staring at the TV being like, what's going on? And so that bubble bursting was burned into my consciousness where it's like, oh, crap, like these things can really like go down very, very dramatically. Right. And so I've been conditioned to have relatively modest expectations where the way I was trained, check it out, and some of these numbers may or may not match up anymore. But you have something called cash and CDs where you might get, let's call it 3%, 4%. And then you have something called bonds where you might get 5% or 6%. And then you have stocks where your expectation might be something like 8, 9, 10%. And then you distribute things among these general categories. And so you expect your combined return to be somewhere in the single digits. And then if you wait around long enough and that compounds, then that can add up. Like, so that's the way I was trained. Now, some people who are listening to this are like, oh my gosh, like that feels very old fashioned because so some people, and one of the things that's happened over this last number of years in crypto in particular is just the volatility is so high so that when you talk about like a 6% swing, like that could be a week or a day.
Right. I think people's views on risk taking have fundamentally changed. I think for a decade after the financial crisis, we had these very low interest rates, and that led people...
the old like zero interest rate environment.
Right. So bonds were not returning anything. CDs were not returning anything. So I think a lot of people got accustomed to kind of being all in on the stock market. But that's been taken to the next level over the past few years with things like cryptocurrencies, which were not around during the dot-com boom, right? Yeah. Now you have these trades that offer a lot of leverage, and they offer these really eye-popping returns within seconds, minutes, days, you name it. And I think people's expectations of what they're, what they think they can get from their portfolio has changed.
No, so I also want to out myself in terms of my cryptocurrency
I'm loving this.
involvement. So check it out. I'm running for president. Cryptocurrencies are coming up. I have some friends who are in it. But I never wanted to be accused of boosting my own book or whatever.
So no Yang meme coin coming soon.
So I didn't own any crypto because I didn't want to be someone who was like crypto boosting and being like, I own this crypto, and I'm like trying to get you guys to like, buy in to boost the value. So I essentially sat out most all of that boom. And my primary interest in cryptocurrencies were around uses of the technology around smart money and smart contracts to be able to do really innovative things. For example, you can only use it at small businesses that are local, which is an idea Mark Cuban posed during COVID. But the other thing I was excited about was that I thought they could be used to alleviate poverty at scale because you have like hundreds of billions of dollars of value being generated. And so I went into the community and said, hey, guys, let's find use cases for the technology that can be really positive, and let's try and use it to combat poverty. And I will say that those things have been frustratingly slow to happen / not happening. And when I was talking to folks in the cryptocurrency community, I'd say to them, look, the fact is there's been one killer app for this tech so far, and it's financial speculation. So if
people are gambling in the cryptocurrency market.
Yeah. And so it's like, we need a killer app that is not, is not built around speculation. And there have been some pilots and efforts around using the blockchain for some positive things. But that's the main thing, obviously. And then some, FTX and some other things happened where people, and one of the things I remember when you talk about the zero interest rate environment, which I agree plowed all this money towards riskier and riskier assets. But a lot of these crypto holdings at that point would say, like, you can get 8% interest on this when bonds and CDs were paying a very small fraction of that.
Zilch. And that's what it is. It's you want an 8% return today rather than, the annualized 8, 9, 10% return in the stock market over time. And a lot of people are turning to things like meme coins, right? They want to 10x their money within minutes.
The freaking Trump meme coin. So let's talk about that a little bit.
What a wild ride. And I heard from individual investors who were like, I 10x'd my money within minutes or hours. And I think that's why people are turning to some of these trades to gamble.
I guess now I feel kind of proud of myself in that. Well, but there've certainly been times where there was like a FOMO. It's like, oh, I'm like missing that particular run. I will say, though, maybe it's like the era I grew up in or the rest of it. Like the hyper volatility for folks who are accustomed to it. It's like, ooh, this is great. For someone, like more, I suppose, like long-term, my view, I'm just like, a little bit scared off by the hyper volatility, though it definitely does make you feel like you're missing out sometimes when people have these crazy 10x returns and the rest of it. Now, I will say, and this is one of the backdrops for this phenomenon, is that I've been fine the whole time in the sense that, it's like, I have enough money, it's like I own a home, blah, 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 blah. It's like one of the things I think is happening is that people are operating off of a relatively low base and they're trying to achieve a certain goal. Let's say, have enough to buy a house or whatnot. And if they do what I described before, the old fashioned, hey, put it in CDs and bonds or stocks, it will take forever to get there, maybe never, according to the numbers.
Right. A lot of people feel like they can't afford homes right now. Right?
Yeah, because housing prices have just gone up and up, and so in this way, seeking volatility becomes tempting, almost rational, because it's like, look, if I compound at 4 or 5%, like I'm not gonna get there. So how can I give myself a chance to get there?
Definitely. And I think FOMO is part of our culture, maybe more than ever before. Like, it's part of trading culture too, where people, when they bag a 10x return, they're posting a screenshot on social media.
Totally.
They are not posting the times when they lost all their money trading options or trading meme coins. They are posting the wins, and that draws a lot of others in. And everyone seems to know someone who's become a crypto millionaire seemingly overnight. So I think that makes it very tempting.
Hello, YouTube. Please do hit that like and subscribe button. And don't forget, you can ask questions at mailbag@andrewyang.com. See you on the interwebs. By the way, people do that with their bets too. Like they'll be like, "Oh, I hit a parlay," and then they post.
Oh, is that right?
That's okay. They do that. But they don't post all their losing bets. So,
no one does.
So this is where we get into your reporting, which I think is so important and fascinating. And there's this systematic skew towards the positive because I'm going to tell you about my wins. I'm going to show you the screenshot of my, winning trade or the options bet or whatever it is. I'm never going to show you the L's. I'm not going to show you the ruined relationships, the, broken trust, the dig myself into a financial hole, the sense of despondence. And so I have some friends who've gotten themselves into trouble gambling. I've never done the reporting you have done. So how did you go about getting in touch with people who've been on the losing end of this, because most of them don't like to be very public about it?
This was one of the hardest stories I have ever reported in my 8 years at the Wall Street Journal. I led our coverage of the meme stock mania, found people who were willing to talk about their meme stock wins. It's easy to find people who will boast about their growing portfolios. Getting people on the record, which I needed for this article, for the journal, was very, very challenging. I mean, I cast an incredibly wide net. I spoke with dozens and dozens of investors around the country, in other countries, met with them in person, heard all of their stories, and then a few decided to go on the record with me. I also showed up to Gamblers Anonymous meetings. I, of course, got the permission of the meeting's leaders and said, hey, I'm working on this really important article. And I want to know what's going on. And it was very, very alarming to be sitting in the back of this church basement, and people are sharing stories about how they lost it all sports betting, how they lost it all betting on horse races, and then also how they lost it all trading ETFs, trading options, trading cryptocurrencies. You know, I heard one person say, I told my boss I can't go to that cryptocurrency conference next week because it's just too triggering to be surrounded by all these crypto fans after I lost it all gambling on cryptocurrencies. I heard a man, he was celebrating 1 year since his last bet, young man in his 20s, working in finance, worked in Midtown. He told the room of dozens of men that it had been 1 year since he bet on sports. It had been 1 year since he bet on options on platforms like Robinhood. And I was like, oh my God, these rooms are filling up with people who are struggling with trading in financial markets. And a lot of people don't even think of it as gambling. They're like, oh, because it's on Robinhood, because it's on Webull, because it's on this app, it's investing. Investing is something that wealthy people do. Investing is something that smart people do. It's intellectually stimulating, right? To follow the markets and follow all this stuff. But, you know, as we touched on, the lines have never been thinner.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who've lost their jobs. And then they had some money. And so then they were like, hey, let me start day trading. And then they have some wins for a period of X months. And they're like, I can make more money day trading than I can working. And so they say, you know what, guys, I'm now a trader. And sometimes you hear this and you're like, Like sometimes it's like, okay, that person, very experienced, very senior, know what they're doing, da-da-da. Other times you're a little bit like, I don't know if like this person's got the expertise or the background to make this a thing. And then after they have a few good months, they have a few bad months. And then they go into a deep, dark hole because they're investing their own money. So it's, you know, and there's a period when they're like, I'm making money, and they do the math and they're like, this is like the equivalent of a salary. But then when they start to lose, they undo any of the gains. And then they stop going out as much. When you do talk to them, like you can tell that they're in the dumps. They start feeling bad about themselves. Their self-esteem goes south. At some point, some of them say, it's like, you know what, I need a job. And that's one of the temptations of this space, is that a lot of people do jobs for money, and, you know, it's a very reasonable,
right.
You know, like obviously like rationale to do a job. And so if they think, oh, I can make this money trading or gambling or, you know, investing, then, and this is part of the male wiring, is like, if I'm making money at it, then it's like a job. But the problem is that it's totally volatile and unpredictable whether you'll be able to make the equivalent of a salary in any given period. And sometimes you have a bad month, 2 months, 3 months.
So psychologically, those early wins are incredibly enticing.
Yeah.
And that's what I heard from a lot of individuals. It was like a really big, juicy win in the beginning. Maybe it was on meme stocks. Maybe it was on something else that had gone viral. And then they were trying to chase that and chase that and chase that. And more often than not, they were not able to reclaim that win again. So I pitched an article to my editors last year. As a journal reporter, I'm not allowed to actively trade stocks or options, but because these trades...
How it keeps you healthy.
Right.
Like all the Wall Street Journal journalists are like the most well-balanced people around.
But because these trades have gotten so popular, I said, hey, I want to try these one-day options, the ones that you and I were just talking about.
So fun. Did they give you a little bit of money to mess around?
I had $500 to play around with for 1 week. And I got to tell you, I felt the ups and downs during the week, like when my portfolio was down, kind of took a toll on my mood. And I was like just constantly glued to these alerts that Robinhood was sending me throughout the week. It always seemed like a huge jackpot was just one trade away. lost money most of the week. The last day, I hit an insane return on a Facebook call option. I think I turned a few $100s into more than $2,000.
Wow, it's like 7x.
Right. It was giant. I think it was like a 1,500% return or something like that. And I was in my kitchen that afternoon and my friend goes to me, "It looks like you're like high or something." Like I was like buzzing with this excitement and this energy. And that evening I told like friends at a bar that I wished I could keep trading. I was like, why doesn't the journal let me do this? It was so fun. Of course, I'm glad. But I think that's what happens. You get a big win and you want to keep doing it.
Yeah. It makes you feel like a genius also.
It does.
Because it feels like, oh, I outsmarted everyone and the market.
It's hard to argue with that giant number on your screen, right?
Yeah,
showing that return. Yeah,
totally.
It's a scoreboard.
Yeah, I think in some ways having those wins is the worst thing that can happen to someone. And so just randomly, like first time I ever went into a casino, I won. And so then I liked gambling as a result. It's like, oh, like this is great. And then all the successive times, like, oh, maybe that was like a bit of luck. Same thing with sports betting. I think the first big bet I made, I won. And it was like, oh, this is great too.
Do you play poker?
I recreationally, like I'm not dedicated to it in part because I know that it would be this enormous time commitment. I made like a time money trade-off decision. And I said, this is probably not the way I want to spend my time, but occasionally I'll do like a charity event or something. Yeah,
I got into it last year and I kind of have been witnessing this tension between trying to have a strategy and being smart about it. And there's just moments when you want to gamble and like do something ridiculous.
Totally.
So I've felt that kind of tension firsthand.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. How did you choose which internet service provider to use? The sad thing is, most of us didn't have much of a choice because ISPs operate a lot like monopolies in the regions that they serve. They then use this monopoly position to take advantage of customers, and yes, they even sell your data, your activities to advertisers and big tech companies, and you don't see a dime. That's why I protect my internet surfing and devices with ExpressVPN. When you use ExpressVPN, it's like a magic portal to a perfectly safe and anonymous internet. And don't take my word for it. This is the #1 VPN service according to CNET. It's used by major companies all over the world. So stop handing over your personal data to ISPs and other tech companies who then mine your activity and sell off your information. Protect yourself with a VPN I trust to keep my privacy online. Visit expressvpn.com/yang. That's expressvpn.com/yang to get 3 extra months free. Go to expressvpn.com/yang right now to learn more. What's fun, Gunjan, is that I've taken some significant risks in my career.
You have.
So I'm like not risk averse. But when it's come to this set of phenomena, it's like when I do bet or gamble or whatever, I essentially have set myself a limit of it's like I'm not going to lose more than a certain amount of money. And then anytime I get there, I genuinely am just like, all right, I'm done.
Okay.
And I started doing that when I was younger, and the sums haven't changed, even as frankly, like I'm at a point where now I could probably afford to lose a little bit more, but I'm just like still.
Yeah.
And part of it is I feel guilty. Like if I went into a casino, let's say my limit of loss is like $1,000. Like I just refuse to get past that point. I would just feel like an idiot if I lost even $1,000, frankly, where I could just like turn around and give them that $1,000 to charity or to like someone else and it would be meaningful. And like, what did I do? I just like frittered it away and
But you can do both. You can have fun and be entertained and also donate to charity.
Yeah, very much so. You're right. I should just, anything I lose, I'm like, I'm just going to give it to
charity
now. Like match it.
Your
then people
personal
will be
matching
like,
system.
Go in there and lose. But that's like my programming is like, I don't want to bet an amount that in absolute terms might actually make a difference to a human.
Fair enough. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I can so easily see though that if someone got a win in investing then they would say, let me like double down on this, and this is going to be my new job. And it's so much faster and more efficient seeming than doing some kind of hourly job
Right.
where you're going to get paid a certain amount, and it's predictable and kind of so one thing about, I'm going to say men, is that we can tell ourselves a story about our hitting it big.
Okay.
And when I was talking to the guy who was on the sports gambling, is that it combines all these things that men love, which is risk, speed, technology, feeling like you're smarter than other people. So there's like a sense of power.
Okay.
And status and work all kind of merge into one. And so the status part is that if you do hit some big trade, you really want to brag about it.
Yes.
Like that's a lot of the fun.
Totally. I think that's almost as exciting, right? To tell your online followers about this win. And, I have a stat here for you, which is that cryptocurrency investors are predominantly men. I believe around...
Which will surprise no one.
Right. I think it's like more than 40% of them are men, or 40% of men invest or have invested in cryptocurrencies. And that number is way, way, way lower for women. And that's stacked up with kind of my reporting.
So when you go into one of these rooms, you'd say it's like 90% men?
More than 90% men. Sometimes I saw one woman. And of course, there's Gamblers Anonymous meetings throughout the country. I was attending those in the New York area, but it was very, very rare for me to see a woman in there. And very, very rare for me to chat with an individual investor on the phone just as part of my reporting.
And how many people do you think you talk to?
I mean, I chat with dozens of people a week, but the ones trading options, the ones in cryptocurrencies just tend to be men more. And, one of the men I quoted in this article, to your point about working and kind of maybe even providing, right?
Yes.
He had a kind of regular job in marketing, and then he discovered cryptocurrencies, and he was like, I can turn this into my profession. He set up 6 screens in his basement and was like looking to arbitrage the prices on different exchanges. And then he flew to Florida to look at potential vacation homes with his winnings. He thought, oh, wow, this is 4 Lambos I have here. He was doing it for himself, but also he felt good that he was able to provide for his family and maybe buy this new vacation home, maybe buy a new car. And of course, it ended up tearing apart his family. It was very draining on his marriage. Yes, he told me, he's like, I was getting irritable. His wife was starting to get worried about his gambling. And I heard that from several men. I heard from several men whose marriages ended in divorce.
Yeah.
One man I quoted in the article said that he was not able to stop trading until his wife threatened to leave him. She said, if you don't stop trading, I'm done. And even then, he had a tough time pulling away. He said he would keep downloading the apps, deleting them, downloading the apps, deleting them. And, towards the end, as we got closer to publication, it seemed like he was in a much better place with it. But, I ended up on the phone with several wives through the course of this reporting, and as I was trying to get people on the record. And I wanted to hear from them, hear their experiences, and many of them were really, really not happy, and their marriages were on the verge of being broken apart.
There are, I'm sure, any number of women who are listening to this right now, they're nodding their heads. They have a boyfriend or a partner who is glued to their screen and having their moods just shoot up and down based
right, you're
upon
very
what's
irritable.
happening.
You can't sleep sometimes. You're irritable. You're snapping at people. You might hole up in a basement because you want to claw that loss back. I heard a lot of those stories. Like
Yes.
You might not be able to stop fidgeting.
And unfortunately, a lot of them expect this to get worse, not better. I mean, with Trump and the meme coins, plural,
Right.
and this very, very pro-crypto regime, I think it does get a lot worse. And if you were to ask me, it's like, so if I were to be, try and be like non-alarmist, I would say that there are 100% going to be booms and busts in this. So, that would be the expectation. I think that we're going to have a bit of a boom period, but I think that, and part of this is, you don't have to be a genius. All you have to do is like look even back at our recent past where, there's like a boom bust cycle, I think, 18 months ago
Right.
or something along those lines. There's something, no, you feel compelled to participate sometimes when these things are going. Now, I personally do not feel compelled to participate, which I'm.
You have your $1,000 max loss.
Yeah, I mean, like certainly in like gambling and the rest of it. I'm sure. By the way, and I will say too, it's like, do I make very, very aggressive investments sometimes? Yes, but those investments tend to be in some friend's company.
Okay, that's your YOLO.
Yeah. Where like a friend's like, hey, I'm doing this and that. And I'm just like, sure, let's go.
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Because that to me is like, I mean, some of it's very risky. Some of it I'm never going to see again. But I'd much rather support my friend in doing the thing and accept that risk than in something speculative like on the exchanges.
But it's about what percentage of your portfolio or your net worth is it, right? And I'm sure that's something you're taking into account when you're investing in a friend's business or you're going to a casino. It's like,
well, this is part of it, is that if someone were to say to me, it's like, hey, is it rational to like have a certain proportion in crypto? I'd be like, sure, it's rational. And then people can argue very, very long and hard about what that proportion should be.
Sure.
I mean, some people are advocating. I was at one event where they were advocating for like 50%. And I was like, yo, that seems way too high to me.
Well, it's above 100,000 now, right? They're laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, right. And then you look at it like, ha, ha, ha. And it's like, I still feel fine. But there's a... So the trends are heading in this direction. Things will go down as well as up. You're a journalist. I'll tell you where I came out on this online sports betting was like, we really should not have just legalized this and made it as broadly available. It pains me that I'm a big sports fan. Anytime I turn on ESPN or whatever, it's like, make this bet, ESPN bet. They have their own freaking,
it's everywhere.
Gambling platform.
It's everywhere.
And so in my mind, you could apply some of the same principles to some of these investing platforms.
Well, it goes back to this line being very blurred, right? Because some of these short-dated options, for example, the meme coins, it is gambling. But are you going to regulate, the short-dated options differently than you're going to regulate the options expiring months or years from now?
So did you draw any conclusions as to how you might be able to improve the environment? Would you say, for example, look, options contracts, you have to
well, it's incredibly easy. It's incredibly easy to just light up the app, have virtually no knowledge of options and enter into some of the riskiest financial tools on the planet. They really are. They can completely incinerate your portfolio. And you get on there and it's just so easy. It's like kind of looks like a slot machine, the way it's all structured, and it really draws you in. And I think that's one of the challenges right now. And why so many people told me they expect this problem to get worse.
Hey all, if you know me, you know I'm not that handy in the kitchen, and I have become a huge believer and booster of Factor. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating a joy. It's so fast. You just pop that thing 2 minutes later, and you are eating a restaurant-quality, healthy meal, making you feel excellent about yourself. My favorite is the turkey chili with zucchini, and there is so much more to choose from. You never get tired of it. It fits any budget. It's fast, healthy. It is going to be the new Factor in your life. Yes, I'm a fan. Head to factormeals.com/yang50 and use code yang50 to get 50% off your first box and 2 free wellness shots per box while subscription is active. That's code yang50 at factormeals.com/yang50 to get 50% off your first box. Get Factor today. It's going to change the way you eat. Yes. So let's project forward. I think the problem does get worse. Do you think at some point regulators look at this and say, hey, we've let this go a little too far?
We've had regulators the past few years comment on gamification. That was a big issue during the pandemic when all these individual investors turned to markets. when Robinhood was first gaining prominence, right? Putting confetti on your screen when you placed a trade. I think they don't do that anymore. Regulators have commented on it. This is an administration now that doesn't seem, at least the thinking on Wall Street right now is that they are not going to put more regulations on markets and corners of the financial world. They are going to put fewer regulations. And even before Trump took office, you were seeing things heading that direction. I'm sure you were following the election betting, right? For the first time ever on mainstream brokerages like, Robinhood, Interactive Brokers, you could bet on who the president was going to be. So things have been getting crazier in the markets even before Trump was elected. And now I think a lot of people on Wall Street, at least those I've been chatting with, don't think there's going to be more regulation. Yeah.
And you were saying before, it's like I write about markets, which means at this point I could write about anything.
Yeah, everything is a market story. Everything is a money story. And everything is becoming tradable now. I think that's what you're seeing with things like election bets. I mean, you can bet on sports, you can bet on elections, politics, you can bet on who's going to win the Oscars. And this is on mainstream financial platforms.
Now, so given that you've now had more exposure to the downsides of these things, if you decide to go on these behaviors, first, you should be totally clear-eyed and rational about what percentage of your savings or portfolio that you're working with. But the other thing is the psychic toll. One reason why I don't bet on sports as much as I did is that I realized it was making me cranky.
Oh, really?
In a way that was so dumb. I'll just describe it. I might have bet like $100 on a particular game, and then I'd be in a bad mood if my team was losing. And even though $100, I can afford to lose $100, but it's just like that. There's something about losing that, irks you.
Yes.
And there's something about losing based upon a decision you made that irks you because you're like, oh, I made the wrong decision. Like, oh, da-da-da. And then you find yourself irritable and then you want to undo it. And then the way to undo it, obviously, is to make another bet that wins. so then you have to say, oh, I guess I have to bet $150 or $200 on something that wins.
You want to claw back those losses. Yeah.
Yes. And because now I'm very vigilant, where it's like when I realized it was screwing with my mood, I was like, well, this is clearly not worth $100 to me. And this is someone who spent years on the road away from my family. And then now, like, when I'm around my family and I'm like, with one of my kids and I'm like staring at my phone, pissed off my team is losing. And then I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Like,
I heard that a lot from the men I interviewed for this article. They said they were like in the car with their wives and like they were just hooked on their phones, or they were at a basketball game for their kids and like not watching the game. They were on their phones, stressed out about their portfolios.
Yes. So when you realize that that's happening to you, you should know that's a red flag. You should be like, this should not be affecting my mood. Like, my mood is very important. My family is very important. My enjoyment of my life is very important. And the fact that I was irritated over the loss of like a trivial amount of money in this game, I was like, this is so stupid. Now, if you took it up a notch, I mean, in some cases, people are transfixed because it's actually a material amount of money which is happening for a lot of folks out there. So number one, percentage allocations, just stick to it. Maybe have a loss thing like I did. But number two is be very, very attentive to whether it's actually affecting your emotional state.
I think that's such a good point. And I think anyone getting into these markets, just try to think about the game that's being played around you. I spoke with an incredibly successful professional options trader. And we were chatting about some of these dynamics. I was talking to him about this trading experiment that I did. And again, this is a guy who's been on Wall Street, traded for one of the top market-making professional trading firms out there. Incredibly skilled at what he does. And the way he described it to me is that a rookie investor, like myself, like you, who enters the options market, that's like you playing basketball against LeBron James. And you need to know that before you're walking in. It's going to be very, very difficult for you to beat that game.
Well, sure.
But I think those jackpots can muddle that a little bit for people, and then they don't realize that as much.
Yeah, so the third thing would be to take everything you're seeing with like an enormous grain of salt, where you see everyone posting their winnings. They're not posting their losings. They're not posting the, fractured relationships, the screwed up vacations, the like
near
squandered life
bankruptcies.
savings.
Yeah.
Like so, and you've seen that stuff firsthand. And this is a frustration I have too, is that I think as a society, I'm someone who I consider myself fairly objective and rational. So I look at the numbers and be like, oh, this is, harming X number of people, according to the studies. We focus too much on the outliers and the winners in American life. And I'm 100% sure that these phenomena have as many or more losers than winners. It's just that the losers don't raise their hand and say, hey, I'm a schmuck, I lost all this money. But that they're there. They're just too ashamed to share their stories a lot of the time.
I mean, it's not that different from going on Instagram and seeing sometimes it feels like every single person I know is like in Europe in a luxury hotel, right? And like living their best lives. And how far is that from?
Now, who do you hang out with, Gunjan? No, I'm kidding.
No, I mean, don't you get that when you go on Instagram? Like everyone is on some like crazy getaway.
Am I guilty of that? thinking of my social media habits, thinking of my friends.
But it's not always as it seems. And I think that there's a similar trend in the Discord chat rooms that a lot of these traders are in the, the posts on X now and Reddit groups for sure.
It's funny you raise this because I've actually...
I don't mean to shame your vacation posting.
I'm unpacking this just because, maybe people find this beneficial. So it was COVID and people were, very stressed and saddened and whatnot. And then someone said something to me that affected me where they said, hey, Andrew, you're just putting positive out there actually makes some people feel better because, I do have like a couple million social media followers and all the rest of it.
Okay. Throw me a retweet later.
So I'm sure I will. So I was like, oh, crap, I should put positive stuff out there. Because like the least I could do.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's held true to this day where folks tell me randomly that's like, hey, it's like sometimes I go to your social media feed just as a pick me up because I know it's going to be positive and you're not going to be, like lambasting anybody. I'm like, oh, so, like that there's like a little bit of like this responsibility I've felt.
I love that.
Yeah. And so I've done it. Now, I will say that it's not like fancy European hotel rooms for the most part. It's like it tends to be like wholesome family.
I need to unfollow everyone.
But then I was going to make a joke just now. It's like, I'll post a picture of myself having a good time with my family or whatnot. And then, I joke about like it doesn't show all the times I'm like crying alone in my room, wondering why, where it's gone wrong. Now,
the moral of all this is like think twice before you follow those stock market influencers out there. Really, that's the point I was trying to make.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. I've been a mattress guy ever since I can remember, ever since I started working out, honestly, because I thought to myself, you know what? If you're going to do something, ideally 8 hours a day, you should try and do it right. I've been partnering with Helix Sleep for several years, ever since they sent me a Dawn Firm mattress that was identified via personalized sleep quiz because I knew I needed extra support. And it's been exactly what I was looking for. I wake up healthier, recharged, more energized. And for some reason, it's my kids' favorite mattress in the whole house, even though it was not made with them in mind. I've had numerous friends buy Helix Sleep mattresses at my recommendation, and they say it's exactly what they're looking for too. Don't take my word for it. It's the number one mattress recommendation of GQ, Wired, my kids. The list goes on and on. Go to helixsleep.com/yang for 27% off site-wide, plus 2 free Dream pillows with mattress purchase. Again, that's helixsleep.com/yang for 27% off site-wide, plus 2 free Dream pillows with a mattress purchase. helixsleep.com/yang. With Helix, better sleep starts now. And it's something I feel for folks who, when you say like, everything's a market now, one thing that's 100% a market is these influencers who are trying to get followings, the rest of it, and like putting stuff out. There's like this like constant pressure. So So the third point again is, don't believe everything you're seeing out there. Just imagine that it's being filtered where you're just seeing like the most positive version for that person's interests. And 9 times out of 10, that person's interests are getting you to follow them and do something so that their economics improve.
Definitely. Like whether it's charging you subscription fees for like a course on trading or God knows what, right?
Or just following their trade so their trade does better. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, buy the thing I bought because then the price will go up and, I'll make a little more.
And we've seen that the past few years with these pump and dumps. Yeah, definitely. They're rampant on social media.
And don't be afraid just to sit the whole thing out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I have multiple friends this past number of days who say they've been like deleting apps or like trying to.
Oh, is that right?
Detox in various ways. No, they were talking about it because they were unhappy with some of like the oligarchs, recent behaviors or something along those lines. But there is wisdom to that when it comes to some of these trading apps and investing apps and betting apps.
One counselor at a gambling treatment center in Virginia that I interviewed said that when people enter their doors for their inpatient gambling treatment program, and they've seen a roughly 25% increase in patients coming in for gambling in financial markets compared with 4 years ago. He said he sits down with them. He deletes not just the FanDuels and the DraftKings, but the Robinhood, the Webull, the financial news, right? They're deleting traditional brokerage apps from people's phones in order for them to stop gambling.
Yeah, that's what needs to happen.
And some platforms like think Gamban, these are apps that you can download on your phone to make sure that you can't access those gambling apps for people struggling with compulsive gambling. They've started adding some of the brokerages just a few years ago.
I had a friend who had gotten himself into some trouble, and then he registered with the state, and the state essentially said okay, you're not allowed to do anything, and essentially made it so that none of these apps function for him.
But that's just for sports. My understanding is you cannot do that you cannot do that for the brokerages, and then some of these apps that you can pay for have added the brokerages.
That is a very worthwhile development and innovation. And so I'm going to throw a fourth thing in for this list, which is if you know someone who you think might need some help, you might want to nudge them and be like, hey, I think this behavior has gone a little bit overboard. And if you yourself need help, do get help and don't blame yourself for what is a compulsive addictive behavior because it's 100% addictive. It's biological in many ways. And Gunjan has seen, people can come together, get help, get better, get some sort of support. But just trying to beat it yourself, it isn't realistic for a lot of people.
I was so inspired attending these Gamblers Anonymous meetings. I really think that the people who show up, who might have lost everything, have lost their relationships, maybe have lost all of their money, right? But they're showing up to these meetings, sharing, getting support, giving support. It takes so much strength to do that. And I truly thought that many of the men in these rooms were just heroes for getting help and trying to get better one day at a time.
And they're heroes for sharing their stories with Gunjan. Hopefully things will get better as people realize that this is going to be an issue. But, it's really, it's the kind of issue that a lot of people are going to have to tackle in their own lives because I do not think government's going to come in and save you. I don't think the culture is necessarily going to help you. And so we're going to have to help the people in our own lives and help ourselves.
I think this is one of, if not the biggest financial market story to keep an eye on in 2025. The boom in cryptocurrencies, the boom in other riskier trades, like the 24-hour casino is coming to the mainstream financial markets.
Yeah. We opened sort of in how I got socialized and trained in my 20s, seeing, frankly, a bubble burst in front of me, just as I was entering my professional life. A lot of people are getting very, very different experiences in their formative years, and it's changing their perception. For many of them, I think they're getting the wrong message.
Well, there's now a generation that's just grown up with cryptocurrencies and expecting these types of returns.
So thank you for being a voice of humanity and reason in this space. One of the reasons I think this does not get enough attention is that it tends to be men. And I will say, like, male struggles kind of get swept under the rug
You
in
think
a
so?
particular way. Like, I mean,
Okay.
we're in a weird era now, but we're now maybe like different versions. But certainly, I do think that if it's like a bunch of bros who are suffering, people are like, which is a problem. I mean, like. People are people and suffering is suffering. And in this case, the suffering does tend to have very, very significant social effects and externalities and, a bunch of other things. But thank you for highlighting what people are going through with this. If someone wants to keep up with you and your reporting, how can they best do so?
Oh, I love that. Thank you for asking. You can find all my work at WSJ.com. I also recently started a podcast for the Journal called Take on the Week. So check us out and follow me on X at GunjanJS, where Andrew will be retweeting me later
Yes,
with his millions of followers.
No, it's true. I mean, millions across platforms. But, I think I'm at like 1.7 million on X. So
That's
it's
admirable.
like, I mean, the numbers are real. I mean, so now I feel like inventorying my social media.
These are like a lot of shameless plugs from us right now.
No, I just want to keep it real. But really, you're someone whose reporting I enjoy and turn to, and I think people should definitely keep up with you and your takes.
Thank you. This has been so fun.